Hey, welcome back to Coaches at Crown Brew Getting Coffee. It's great to be here. It's great to have some summertime episodes, and I've got a fantastic guest today, a guy that deserves to be heard and to be talked about, an amazing career, and we're going to get into that. I want to first of all thank Swinford Media. I want to thank Ross and Abby for being here. I want to thank all they do to put this together, and sometimes we Zoom them and I send them in. Sometimes they're here to film in person. They do a tremendous job, and don't forget about the wedding videography they do. If you have an interest in that or need that, I know they'll do an amazing job for you. I want to thank Crown Brew for letting us be here today on this hot Wednesday afternoon. I want to also thank Adrenaline Fundraising and Matt and Jeff for being a part of my life as a fundraiser and helping me raise a lot of money when I coached and helping a lot of my friends in this business raise money. And I want to thank my buddy Tony Gooch at Marion Plumbing for your residential and commercial needs. He's the best, does a great job, and Tony and his group will take care of your plumbing needs. And plumbing is zero fun unless you know what you're doing, and Tony knows what he's doing. So my guest today is Rich Williams. Rich, welcome, man.
Thank you.
We go way back.
Yes, we do, Coach.
We go back to the beginning of my career, and our lives kind of intersected in a little town called Sparta, but we'll get into that in just a second. Let me give you a little bio on Rich. Assistant basketball coach at 4 different high schools, coached at Swick under Jay Harrington, who won over 1,000 games, then at Northwest Missouri State, so you got a little high school, little college background. He's an assistant football coach at 3 schools, head football coach at Elvarado and Sparta, successfully added Trico as a co-op, which we'll get into when he was at Elvarado, head basketball coach at 3 schools, coached bass fishing, which I thought was a cool thing to add to this, athletic director at 3 schools, Coulterville, Sparta, Elvarado, coached under 4 basketball Hall of Fame coaches, coached under a football Hall of Fame coach, coached under 1 college coach in the Hall of Fame, and more recently, for the last 17 years, he has been the Southern Illinois Coaches Association president, a career dedicated to our kids in Southern Illinois. That's some of the best programs, and I think it's some of the most challenging programs, as well as serving our Coaches Association. One of the longest tenures it has to be in that position as president, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's a pretty dang good resume, Coach, and I'm glad you're here today to talk about it.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. It's quite an honor. Anytime I get to talk to you, it's always an honor.
Oh, bless you, brother. Let's talk about your childhood. Start off, you grew up in Sparta.
Right.
Tell me about it.
Well, I went to school in Sparta, went all the grade school, went to high school. Sparta's a great town to grow up in, Coach, in this respect. We had a Sparta comic book factory, which printed the most comic books of any place in the world, 3 shifts going. You had a diverse group of people. You had blue-collar people. You had shirt and tie people. You know, you had different ethnic groups. It was just such a melting pot, and a really neat town to grow up in. The whole time I grew up, economy was strong. Really, I thought I got a really good education. School system was strong, and then, you know, I was lucky enough to play junior high ball, and then in high school, played basketball, played football, just average or below player, played tennis my junior and senior year, and just, you know, I was raised by 2 loving parents. My dad worked at Illinois Power for 40 plus years. My mom taught piano for 40 plus years. They're 92 and 90. My mom still plays the piano on Sundays at church, has all her, basically her adult life.
Yeah.
My dad cultivated an athletic culture that from my brother and I, and the reason I say that is, you know, when I was growing up, there was only 1 football game every Saturday at 2:30 on ABC, and my son Bryce can't hardly understand that. And you know, we got 40 on now.
Yeah.
If you wanted multiple games, you watched the bowl games on New Year's Day, which we did.
That's right.
But my dad would show me things. You know what I mean? Like, did you see how that running back cut? Did you see how he stepped? And did you see how that receiver kept 2 feet in bounds? And you know, just little things. And did you see how that lineman pulled? Or you know, just little things. And just cultivated such a good athletic culture for my brother and I to grow up in. My mom did the piano. My brother-in-law thought that was sissy, and my sister can play fluently. We can't play at all. And I wish now that I could a little, because I wish I had some culture.
That's a regret I have too. I know I always say that.
But we thought that was sissified back in the 60s and 70s, so we didn't learn.
Yeah.
But we were out playing ball all the time, and you know, I think everybody thinks their hometown's a neat little place. But as a youngster, it was really a good place to grow up in. And my older brother was a really good athlete, was all conference, played on Sparta's best team they ever had, made the final Elite Eight for furthest Sparta's ever went in team sport. And later played football at Illinois College.
Yeah.
So, my sister is a court reporter in St. Louis, so federal court reporter. So, you know, I had a sister and a brother, and it was just, I don't know, it was just a neat time to grow up. And, you know, when I was a little kid, I thought the Sparta Bulldogs were it. I mean, everything about them, you know, we lived right across from the school.
Yep.
Back then, before they built the vocational building, all the buses were in the back row, so we didn't have school on snow days. If the buses were there, we knew we were getting to stay home. WHCO didn't have to tell us, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it was just a really neat time, and I think my dad grew me in so many ways. We had season football tickets at the Big Red games, you know, in 1972, and I got to see Coach Coryell turn that program around. And we didn't get there just before the game. We got there an hour or so before the game. We watched all the pregame. I've seen Jim Bakken kick more than any guy you ever seen, and all of it. But I think that formulated my how things were supposed to be and how you should do it. My goodness, when you get to see George Allen lead the Redskins on the field doing calisthenics, and Tom Landry in his fedora, and Coach Shula and Coach Noel, you know, it was just a great. And then not only that, and then a basketball season, he would take us to SIU games. We went to all the Centralia, Carbondale, the big tournaments, the big games. And I just think, and then in my 6th or 7th grade year, he started taking us to the state basketball tournament. And I went for 50 straight years with the exception of the COVID year. This was my 50th state tournament this year.
Wow, that's really cool.
It was just, he set the tone. So really my dad's my hero, to tell you the truth, because he loved the game. He was a student of the game. He originally wanted to be a coach, but when he got the job at Illinois Power, he never, you know, it just didn't happen for him college-wise. And so I kind of, in some ways, probably lived his dream. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's really cool. And I love that you and I talked on we were dropping big red names, big red football names, and those are great memories for me. And I think most people know this. I coached at Sparta and taught for 4 years. You said it. I love the way you said it. It's kind of a melting pot. It had the country kid, had the Sparta kid, had the Evansville kid, had a lot of diversity in race and in background and in socioeconomics. And I had such a good teaching experience there. The kids, the staff was wonderful. My experience there was great. I only left because I got reduced in force along with 33 other teachers and went on and moved on to Florida because I had to find a job. But my experience there had a profound impact on me the rest of my life. And that group I had, my only year as head coach there, was a great group to have your first job with, your first head coaching job with a pretty special group. So I love how fondly you speak of Sparta, because I have nothing but good memories of it, and I'm glad you shared that. That got me excited just hearing that. And I love the fact your dad, whether he meant to or not, was planting those coaching seeds, right?
Right.
When did you know that this is something I want to do?
My dad said in the 1st grade, I told him I'll be the coach here someday.
Wow.
I looked over at the gym and
Really?
said I'll be the coach here someday. So he said it was a really early age. They knew that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, when I was a senior in high school growing up, I ran the Sparta Little Dribbers basketball program as a senior in high school. And I just was around it. I got the taste for it and just grew to love it. I don't know if I ever want to do anything else, to tell you the truth.
When you went off to college, you started coaching almost immediately, right?
Right. I graduated in 1980 at Sparta High School. I went to SWIC. My first 2 years at SWIC, I was a grade school basketball at Prairie Trinity Lutheran outside of Red Bud, Horse Prairie, right outside of Red Bud.
I didn't know that.
Little Lutheran grade school. So I got going there and got to know Jay Harrington. So the next year I was as a student assistant, and I did that for a year. And then Truckee College came down to play from Northwest Missouri. They came down to play at McKendree Tournament, and they practiced at SWIC. And I met the coach, and he said, you know, it was a small college, 600 or so students, and he said, we're going to have a student assistantship next year. It'll pay for your school, this and that. And I went out there and interviewed with him in June, and so I helped at Tarkio for several years when I went to school. Also was the intramural director. I think that set the tone for my athletic director background doing the
Sure.
intramurals. I learned so much about organization and
Putting all that together,
putting it
yeah.
all together. So it was just great. And then when I graduated from there, I had several offers in Northwest Missouri high schools to coach and teach, and I didn't take them because at that time Illinois paid so much better.
Yeah.
And I came to Illinois, back to Illinois, and had the job at Mulberry Grove. And Coulterville called. Well, Coulterville is 6 miles from where I grew up. And Coulterville had a bunch of success. Rodney Watson had been there.
Mark North had been
Yes,
there with Rodney.
good coaches,
Yeah.
good coaches, great
Yeah.
coaches. And they had won the regional. They had upset Pinckneyville at Pinckneyville, little Coulterville. So the kids that I inherited that were seniors dressed on that. My two best players dressed on the varsity as freshmen when they won the regional. And those kids won 20 games every year till I got them, and we were 14 and 12. And I thought I knew so much, and I didn't know nothing, Coach.
Yeah. Well, I think we all go through that our first job. We think we know more than we do.
And then, we had a few issues, and I got released 4 votes to 3. I hadn't even started my career. And then I started selling insurance at Prudential Insurance, and I had to be the worst insurance salesman in the history of Prudential. And in the start of the basketball season, I didn't do anything that fall. I worked at Prudential.
You missed coaching,
right?
didn't you?
Oh, in the worst way. Mike Cruz's assistant, Anna Jonesboro, big Mike Cruz, had quit at second week of the season. And Greg Jones from Sparta called him and said, "Hey, I got a boy here, Rich Williams, coach, been a head coach, wants to coach." He interviewed me at the Murfreesboro Old Pit Gymnasium in the pit at a Fresh South game. And the next day I was coaching basketball for Mike Cruz.
Yeah.
And
So off to Anna you went.
and off to Anna I went. And my goodness, I helped him in basketball and Milton Young in football.
Yeah.
And you talk about two strong personalities.
Yeah.
Milton had won the state title.
Yep.
The football program was rolling.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. And they were both big influences for me.
You have had a career. People will see that as we go. You've had a career of intersecting with legendary coaches, from Coach Harrington to Milt Young to Mike Cruz. I mean, you tend to find yourself in the path of some pretty amazing coaches over and over again, right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Well, I've been real fortunate. The
Yeah.
good Lord's always shined a light on me. I've always been able to have a job, maybe not the best jobs, because some of the schools I've been at were tough, but always could feed my family. I always could provide.
Yeah.
Always had, but yeah, I caught the coaching bug at a really young age.
We talked about Milton Young,
Right.
The football dynasty that
Right.
he had there, and you got to be a part of that right at the end of his career. And what are some things you took away from Mike and Milton? What were some things that you, as a young coach, you're sitting back watching these two guys? Maybe tell me something you took away from those guys.
Well, from Big Mike, the biggest thing I took away from him was the games won in practice. Son, if we've done our job, I'll never forget, he sat me down and said, "Son, if we've done our job, they don't even need us tonight."
That's
And
I love
never
that.
forgot that.
I love that.
And he was such a student of the game. And this is what I love about him so much. He would tell me why we were doing things. Rich, this is why we're doing things, and this is what you need to look for. And he set me up so well. And he would call me and said, "I want you to watch this, and this is why we're doing this." And he was such a student of the game.
That's great.
And with Milton was the very best of getting the community to be involved. They fed us constantly. I mean, it was just unbelievable how they supported the program.
Yeah.
He was really good at that. And I thought he was a heck of a motivator. You know what I'm saying?
So I love that, what you said about winning the game in practice. My father was a huge believer in that. He was a really good coach too, and he was a huge believer in that.
Yeah.
He took me to watch Virgil Fletcher coach. And I watched Virgil Fletcher sit there with his legs crossed watching basketball during the game, and no emotion, no ranting and raving. My dad nudges me and says, "He's done his job in practice. He doesn't need to make a fool of himself."
Right.
And then I love the idea that someone's telling you why they're doing something, because even as a coach, as a young coach, I did things because everyone else did them, not even knowing why we're doing them, but everyone does this drill or that drill, so I'm going to do them.
Right, because everybody else did it.
Because everyone else did it. And I learned to start asking that question and explain to a player, not only this is the drill we're doing, but tell them why we're doing it. And you want a kid to be motivated to get better at something, you got to tell them why we're doing it.
Right.
Love that, Rich. Thank you for sharing that.
And really, Big Mike saved my career. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be sitting here today without him. God bless him
Yeah,
up there. But and I want to say this before I get off this subject. He was one of the finest basketball coaches I've ever been around, and never got the credit he deserved because his one didn't have that many great teams. He got to state one time,
Yeah.
but he was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. But both of those men are legendary coaches, but also legendary personalities in
Yeah.
Southern Illinois history. So after Anna, where's the next stop?
okay, and from at Anna, I was a substitute teacher, and you know we call them full-time subs now,
Yeah.
but back then we didn't have that. But anytime I was working 3 and 4 days a week, driving from Sparta to Anna every day, 7, then coaching, and then
I
coming
drove
home.
that as a coach.
Yeah, and then I got a call from the Bear that summer. He had lost his football assistant, had left or quit, and I got a chance to go to Pinckneyville and work with Gary Barrick Lindsay, and he was just phenomenal. I looked it up today. Had the current playoff format existed when the Bear was the coach, the Panthers would have made the playoffs 7 times. In his 21 years, he never made it.
I didn't know he
No,
never made
he
it.
never made it. He was 8-1. He was 7-2 several times. He got second in the conference to Murfreesboro. I don't know how many times. He used to give the Murfreesboro coaches a U of M hat, and that just fired them up even more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Playing with them, but he never made the playoffs. But
I love the fact you looked that up.
he took me aside. I'll never forget it. One of his last years, I was with him his last 2 years as head coach. We changed offenses every week. 1 week we was in the split backfield. The next week we was in the veer. The next week we was in the wishbone. The next week he tried something different every week. We don't put 8 or 10 plays in, but we changed that season every week. And I just think that opened me up to so many different philosophies. And
Yeah.
because unfortunately we didn't have a very good team that year, and he just kept trying to find something that would work. But I'll never forget how good he was with interacting kids. And he told me one time, son, if we've done a good job, we're going to see in the next 5 or 10 years if they're good dads, good husbands, good community members.
Amen to that.
And sometimes there's a lot more of this than winning and losing. And it really took me kind of a long time to understand, to really grip what he was saying. But he was good. He was a good football coach. Never got the credit he deserved. Hall of Famer. A really good athletic director. I remember before those sectional basketball games, 3 hours before the game, he'd be out there with a mop and a bucket, mopping Thomas gym floor. I mean, just things that you put the time in.
Yeah,
you
he was,
worked at it.
he was an old school coach, but he had a lot of, I think, new culture ideas, the way you
Yeah.
talked about. He understood why he was doing the coaching. It wasn't just about winning. It was about
Right.
impacting kids. You and I had this conversation before we got on air, but I love that. And I'll tell you something else. He was throwing the ball around with some really good quarterbacks
Before anybody else.
anybody was. And I get some credit for going to the shotgun spread when I did. He was doing it back in the mid to late 80s.
89, we were running the spread.
Gary Lindsay was throwing the ball around, and I think it made Pinckneyville competitive because no one else was doing that. So it was something different they were doing, and everyone else was pounding the rock. And he didn't have those kind of kids.
It was 85-15 back then. 85 run, 15 pass.
It was. And
Yeah.
he flipped that. I don't know what they really were, but they were probably 50-50.
We were 50-50.
And I would say that he knew he didn't have the kids to go head to head
Right.
with Murphy and DuQuoin.
Right.
So let's try something different. Oh, it was genius. It kind of reminds me of the way Purdue handled the Big Ten back in the
Coach
old
Tiller,
days. Coach
yes.
Tiller, yeah, because they didn't have the people. So let's throw the ball around, spread the field. I thought it was great. So
he put in the screen game. Nobody was really running the screen game then, and just different things like
Yeah.
that. And like I said, we had Mike Napier in the shotgun in 1989, and nobody was doing that.
Nobody was doing that. Yeah, he was quite ahead of his time in
Right.
a lot of things, not just the coaching, but I think also in his philosophy.
Right.
I always enjoyed talking to him. I was a young guy, very impressionable, but in my career, I was able to square off at a young age against the Glennseys and the Al Martins and the Jim Woodwards and a whole bunch of Bruce Reeder. My gosh, there's some legendary
They're Hall of
coaches
Fame
back
coaches,
then.
all
Oh
of
yeah,
them.
all of them are, and so that's really cool. Let's talk about what's next. So when you are you spend your time there at Anna Jonesboro, you do the work there. And so, let's keep going. Keep going next step.
At Pinckneyville,
you got Pinckneyville with Coach Glennsey.
right, and they made me a teacher's aide because they didn't have any full-time teaching positions at that time. So instead of being a sub, I was a teacher's aide, and I had a little insurance. At least I had a steady paycheck. And then, along with helping the Bear, that's when I got to help Coach Korn, and things kind of just took off from there. So
Boy, that must have been a great experience.
it was unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
And Pinckneyville's just always been so good to me, and I've never forgotten that. Anytime I've had a hard time, they were always there for me. So appreciate that. And after I was a head coach at Elvarado, the Bear would come every year to watch one of my football games. He'd call, "Hey Richie, I'm coming over tonight. It will be a game?" And he always followed me, and I felt like I was just so lucky to have those kind of influence. Just really blessed.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Sparta Pinckneyville kind of a rival,
Oh, yes.
and all of a sudden Pinckneyville becomes this new home in many ways for you.
Right.
Nothing against Sparta, but
No.
just they embraced you, and you were around some really good coaches, including Coach Wagner and Coach
Right.
Korn. And what did you get from Dick Korn? What was the thing that he left you with as far as you said, Coach Cruz and the preparation?
Well, the thing about Coach Korn, Kerry, is this. All the coaches I've worked for have been wonderful. They're
Yes.
wonderful coaches. But you worked for them. You didn't work for Dick Korn, you worked with him. And I love that.
Wow.
Everything we did, there was a purpose why we did it. We all were in the same, we went down the same road. Everything, we did it together. He never said I, he never had an ego. It was always we, us, the team, the team, the team. And he just, I'll never forget, he said, "Rich, I want you to go with Greg Hale, legendary softball coach.
I know who he
He's
is.
going to teach you how to scout. And you're going to learn how to scout." And boy, did he teach me. And, from that experience, I've scouted in 6 super sectionals. I don't think anybody's ever got to do that. Pinckneyville's flown me to Western Illinois, and just 2 years ago, they flew me up to up north. I'm trying to Joliet to scout. So I've just seen things, and I've been to the Super Section of Illinois State and in Eastern, and I've been to the one at Milliken, and it was just such a so it just kind of formulated. But Coach Korn, to this day, there's only one person in my phone that's Coach, and it's him, because he's just so instrumental, and he was so good at always keeping his emotions in check, because everybody knows I'm emotional, and I think he helped me a lot in that respect. And like I said, to this day, if I have a coaching question, I still text him and call him, and he's been a great mentor and an even better friend.
I'm looking forward to getting him on here. And I thought it was interesting, but when I called him, he said, "I'd like to do it, but I can't make it on a Wednesday." That's when we filmed.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, why not?" And he goes, "Because I drive a bus."
That's what he does. And our kids now think he's the bus driver.
I said to him, I said, "Do the kids on that bus know that a basketball legend is driving?" He goes, I don't know. Maybe some of them do.
In PE, one of the kids asked one of the other physical education instructors, "Why is my bus driver's name on the basketball floor?" So yes. So
that is so great. And
so
I love the fact he's still serving kids. It's such a humble thing to do. I think he really likes it.
Oh, he does. And now he's subbing some too.
Yeah.
And when I first retired, first thing he told me was, "Bud, you got to find something to do, or the days are going to stack on top."
I'm going to get him though. I'm going to get him in that chair
that's
down
wonderful.
there, because this isn't going to be a complete. This whole podcast is not going to be complete until I get Dick Korn on there. So, other great coaches you've worked for basketball wise. Then we're going to switch over to some football stuff. But Bob Wagner?
Bob Wagner is the most mentally tough, physically tough coach I've ever been with. Bob Wagner could take average talent and make it good, and take good talent and make it great. He was physically and mentally tough. Our teams were tough. That was one of our sayings, tough teams win. Because of him, I got to reach my boyhood dream and coach in the Illinois High School State Basketball Final Four, but got to sit right beside him. But it wasn't fun when we got beat, because that next week we were going to have some long practices. But you didn't want to be the team that played us after we got beat, because you were going to take it, because our kids were so tired of practice they couldn't wait to get a game. But he was. I served under him as the IBCA Hall of Fame assistant coach in 2015, and we were running practice. And his drills were so good, Coach, that they stopped the other thing and they all came over to watch what we were doing.
Wow, that's great.
His
That's
practices
really cool.
were phenomenal. His drill work, attention to detail, just a mentally tough person, and really, 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 really good coach. And think about it, he took over for a living legend. How many guys take over for that? And it's so hard and he just kept it going for 16 years.
That's a great.
16 years, he kept feeding the monster.
That's a great point.
And
he was able to sustain that. That is a very difficult thing to do.
When I had problems and had been let go, I'm 57 years old. I'm probably going to get sent down to Little Evansville to teach PE, after being dismissed as Sparta athletic director. And he called and said, "You want to come to Pinckneyville again?" I said, "Oh, Coach, I'm 57 years old. They don't hire teachers with 31 years experience." He said, I'll call you back tomorrow. He called me back tomorrow and said, "I need you to be over here tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. We're going to interview with the superintendent and principal." And I got hired the next week. And you just don't think you're going to move it unless you move to a head coaching, you get a better pay or, something like that. And it came in the right time of my life. And
what a blessing.
I love him to this day for that. And for all those guys, every one of them I've helped, have just formulated everything I believe in. But Bobby is a tremendous coach.
I'll give you one more, and that's Ed Belva.
Oh, the most charismatic coach I've ever been with. He's had so much charisma and so much fire and enthusiasm. And Ed, away from the game, was one way, and we stopped across that line to compete. It was like almost Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because he was so intense. Maybe the most intense competitor I've ever been.
I've sat behind his bench before. I know.
And he would get so upset he'd snap his glasses in half, and I'd make a suggestion, and he'd say, "Oh, everybody's coach, everybody," and then if you didn't suggest, he'd want to say, "You're not going to tell me anything tonight," so but I learned to understand that. The pressure was on him, not me.
Yeah.
And he did a heck of a job at Sparta. Real good job. And that's the reason I got to go home, was because of Ed, because he was going to be the head coach, and he kind of took me with him as the assistant coach. And I was the first PE teacher in the history of Sparta Middle School. They hadn't had a PE teacher up to 2000 ever. The teachers taught PE. Wow. So that's how he got me in. But yeah, he he just had charisma, and he was a good motivator, and he let me coach a lot. I mean, and he'd say, "You do those drills. Go ahead and do this drill," and he'd let me run it, not just, what I'm saying. Sure. And I just think that helped formulate me too. So he's a great man.
Yeah, your assessment of each of these head coaches and what the gift that they had and what they've done, I think not only speaks so well of them, and I appreciate that, but I think it also speaks so well of you, and what the impact you've had as an assistant coach is pretty profound. And I know the value of having great assistant coaches, Rich, and you have been a head coach at some very tough places where winning is difficult and challenging, but don't ever underestimate what kind of an assistant coach you've been as well, because having a great assistant is an invaluable piece of being successful, and you have been that for some great coaches. So tribute to you, brother. Those are some great stories. I love the way you pay tribute to each one. You didn't hesitate when I asked you what did they leave behind, what's their gift, and man, you knew. So very cool.
Well, I appreciate that.
That's Coach. Pretty cool. Let's talk about let's talk about John Whittenborn. So John Whittenborn was the head football coach at Sparta for a period of time, and you had a chance to work with him.
At two places.
At
He
two-
helped me with the
That's
Trico
right.
Elvarado
That's
co-op,
right.
and then we were together at Sparta. John Whittenborn was my dad's right tackle in 1952.
A Sparta guy.
Yes,
Yeah. So
John Whittenborn went to SEMO, later drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. His first pro check was $5,500.
Things have changed.
He played for the 49ers, the Eagles, the Cardinals, and the Houston Oilers in the old AFL. One time, he was one of the few people that got a pension from the National Football League and the American Football League. And he was the first kicker to kick on AstroTurf, place kicker. And the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, asked Coach Whittenborn for his kicking shoe, and he would not give it to him. That's just the kind of guy he was. He said, no, that's going to stay in our family. But he was such a character. He was the best at watching film I've ever seen, breaking down film. You know, he had had so much success. He had played pro ball. And he had coached at University of Tulsa Division I. So he just showed me how to break down film before I think it was home movies that I was watching, kind of. You know what I mean? Showed me how to break down film. Showed me hash marks. Down and distance. This is what we do and why we want to do it. And he was just such a football lifer, and just a really, really good coach.
I love those stories about him. I'll share something kind of cool with you related to him. We held pep rallies at a lot of the grade schools here during homecoming week, and one year we went to Jefferson School here in town, and we're having this pep rally with the cheerleaders and my senior football players, and the grade school kids are lined up, and we're playing catch with them, and they throw it to us, and they go to the end of the line. And this little girl steps up at the front of the line, and she has on a Houston Oilers old-time jersey on, and it says Whittenborn on the back, and it's his granddaughter. And I said, time out, stop. I said, come here a second. I said, tell me who you are and tell me where you got that jersey. And she told me she was his granddaughter, and she has got on an authentic, and it's way too big for her.
Number 67.
Oh, it's great.
Yes.
And I said, so I look for her for the next 2 or 3 years. My buddy and I, Coach Schulmeister, we get so excited to see her in that jersey, and it was a really cool connection to my Sparta past, the old NFL, and there's his granddaughter wearing that Houston Oilers jersey, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's great. Let's talk about being the head football coach at Elvarado. Now, I think both of us know that basketball, what I would guess, would be your first love, and the things that you have had probably the greatest passion for. But there have been opportunities for you to coach football, and Elvarado was one of those.
Yes, and it's 1 and 1A for me because I love them both. Because Coach Rude's asked me many times, how can you get through those basketball seasons when we just got through football? But I've done that almost my whole career, Coach.
Yeah.
At Elvarado, I'm working the summer basketball camp for Coach Aaron. God bless him up there. Worked all his camps, Tennessee, Martin, SIU, McKendree. So I'm down there. Elvarado needs a basketball coach. Well, Ron Heron, who you know well, he makes a phone call. He says, Rich, you want that Elvarado job? And I said, well, I'd like to interview for it. He said, I'll be right back. He went up, called the superintendent. That afternoon, I was at Elvarado interviewing, and I didn't have any dress clothes. I was in camp clothes. You know how that is when you're in basketball camp. Later, when I got to meet in front of the board, I wore a shirt and tie, of course, and dressed up. But no, so they told me I had a good chance to get the position, but they wanted me to interview for the board. I'll never forget this as long as I live. They said, son, if you can say football, you stay here as long as you want. As long as you do a good job in the classroom, as long as you don't do anything morally wrong, you can stay as long as you want if you can just say football. Because you had a faction there that loved football like you couldn't believe. And then you had another faction that thought we were too small, 164 kids, we should drop it. Drop it. We can't win, And but the people that wanted it, we won out. So we went to work the next day. There's 5 people that helped me with save Elvarado football, in my opinion. The year I got there, the year before, they had 14 kids out, and it was about ready to die. And if we didn't get the kids out, we weren't going to have it. Jack Calvert, Kenny Huff, Brent Creed, David Russell, Rich Bernardini, we went door to door to ask kids to play. That first year, I think we got 26 or 28. Next year, we got 30-some. The high point was just Elvarado, was 42 kids.
Just Elvarado?
Just Elvarado. And I never coached one football game at Elvarado High School in anything less than a full house. Now, you can say that at DuQuoin. You can say that about Carterville football. You can say that about several programs in our area, but they all win. And those fans came.
Yeah.
They showered the kids with unbelievable love and support. They gave money to keep it rolling.
Yeah.
If I needed new jerseys, I just went downtown to the furniture store and asked David Downs, and he'd say, "What do you need, Coach?" And we got new jerseys.
Yeah.
Now, it helped that his boy was on the team, I think. You know what I'm saying,
Well,
Adam?
still, though,
But,
yeah.
and later a Navy SEALs member. So, you know,
Yeah.
but that helped. But just keep the program going, and it grew. But this is why the Elvarado boys, football boys, will always be my heroes. They played for two reasons: for the love of the game and for their school, because they only had a 10 or 20% winning chance every time we went out. We were the smallest playing football school south of Springfield, and they played, and those fans supported. I mean, we get standing ovation for a first down, and when we scored a touchdown, my goodness. You know, I'll never forget, Bryce was in the first or second grade. He said, "You know, Dad, you've given up 226 points and you've only scored 6." And I said, "Thanks, Bryce." But, you know, he was learning how to read the sports page.
Yeah.
Grandpa had taught, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you know, I understood then that this is a bigger purpose. And those kids played their hearts out for me.
They did.
And I love every one of them. Justin Shaw made All-South quarterback. He was the leading passer in Southern Illinois.
He was a weapon, man.
Yes,
I'm
we
telling
used
you.
to call him the Flying
The
Falcon.
Flinging Falcon is what we call
Yeah,
him.
and he led Southern Illinois in passing his senior year. Now he works for the CIA. His receiver, Matt Brooks, was in the top
I
two
know Matt, yep.
in receiving. He's a banker in Murfreesboro, assistant coach for Murfreesboro basketball. Proud of those guys. I'm proud of all them Elvarado boys. And when I see those kids to this day, it's a hug.
Amen,
not a shake.
brother.
And to me, that's what it's all about.
That says it in a nutshell. It was more than, it wasn't just about winning a few ball games. It was about a community. It was about a group of kids, that played in the midst of, you said, in the midst of not having a lot of success, but they played because they loved the game. They love how you said that. That was great.
It was a Camelot feeling on Friday.
Yeah.
You know, they lined the field. You probably remember with the Falcon Spirit Tunnel, because
Sure.
we had no band.
Yeah.
And we'd run out through that, and you'd feel like you was 10 foot tall. You could play with the Cowboys. But the support was phenomenal. And another important fact about Elvarado I'd like to mention before we get into the co-op, we had great classroom teachers. They taught me to be a good classroom teacher, because I wasn't when I got there. They pulled me aside and said, "This is why we do things, and this is how you prepare kids, and this is how you want your lesson plans to look." And this, you know, and it was such an intimate faculty. It was a great faculty. They were there for one reason, for those kids. Yeah. And I've always respected that place so much for that.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And that's, but that Elvarado team, for a couple of years there with Justin Shaw at quarterback,
we played with people. We couldn't beat them, but we were competitive.
Absolutely you were. When you put points on the board, I'm sure the fans were just loving that.
Oh, yeah.
I remember those years very well, and hats off to you, because you were under the gun with 164 kids and trying to match, at that time, a Black Diamond Conference, which you and I said beforehand had coaches like Mike Rood and John Kretz and Carl Justice and a whole bunch
Ross
of
Babington
Ross
and
Babington
on.
and
Lou and Wine Miller and
Grubb.
Willie Grubb at McLeansboro.
There
And
were-
even Coach Woods at Carroll did a phenomenal job.
There were great coaches in that Black Diamond Conference, and yet the Elvarado football team was competing, and so hats off to you. But then something big happens. You get a chance to really make a big change at Elvarado and bring in more kids with a co-op. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, our numbers were starting to slide because of our enrollment. You know, we're down to 150 students, so we've lost even more.
Right.
And our number, it was going to be a problem. We were going to be able to play, but boy, it was really going to start. And we had reached out with Trico, see if they would co-op. Trico had played football. A good school, good little athletic school, has been for years, played good basketball, good baseball, hard-nosed farm kids, hard-nosed, working kids, working class farm kids. And this is how bad Elvarado wanted to make that co-op work. They allowed me to be head football coach and athletic director at Elvarado, and during basketball season go to Trico and be Matt Badgley's JV basketball coach, who was another good coach.
Yes.
Matt Badgley. And be his assistant so I could help get kids out for Elvarado Trico football.
Yeah.
And when we left, I think we were up to 51, and it lasted another 10 or 12 years after I was gone. I mean, eventually, but that, you know, they made it work. And those Trico kids loved playing football, some of them, because they'd never had that opportunity.
And it wasn't easy. I mean, they had having to travel that distance.
Right.
How far was that?
It was what was it? I think it was 24 miles, 22 miles, but we went in the back roads, and one day a week we practiced at Trico.
Oh, I
So
forgot
one day a
about
week
that.
I took the Elvarado kids in the bus over there,
I
and the
forgot
other
about
days
that.
Larry Lovell, now the superintendent
Of course.
Trico, would bring the Trico kids on the bus, and then on game day we would meet and go to the game, and then the Trico bus would go take their kids home, but it was just a neat situation.
I love the fact that you guys worked that out so you could give kids that opportunity to play. And I know that wasn't easy, but you opened it up, the experience of playing football, to a lot of kids that normally wouldn't have had
Right,
it. So I
and
thought that was great.
There's nothing like high school football.
That's pretty special. Pretty special. I want to talk about two more things in your life, and that is I want to talk about the AD jobs. You've been an AD. What's the big challenge for you? What do you think, when you think of being an AD and over the years, what to you was the most important part of being an athletic director?
Well, I think number one, you have to hire good coaches. You got to get good people, and that's so hard to do, Coach.
Yeah.
You know, when I started at Coderville, we just had 2 sports or whatever. So, but as I evolved at the different schools, we had more and more activities. Number one, hire good coaches. Number 2, get everybody to work together. And that's the hardest thing I think to do, especially in struggling programs, because you got this group pulling you this way and that group pulling you this way and this group wants this, and you're trying to keep everybody together. And keeping coaches, because my whole tenure as athletic director, they were always wanting to get rid of this coach. And I always had a hard time getting rid of coaches, because I've had it done to myself several times. I've been fired, rifted, cut, rehired, retreaded. About everything could happen. It's happened. So I struggle with that. I always wanted everybody to try to work together and get along. And another challenge is finding officials anymore. You think, oh, that's no big deal. No, it is anymore. Finding good ones and and I always tried to get what my coaches wanted. If you didn't want an official, I tried not to hire them back. Why cause a rift? Tried to get, quality officials, but hiring them, and in the springtime, what a mess. And
The
I'll tell you why.
rainouts are the worst.
The rainouts.
Oh.
It was no problem getting the game scheduled. It was finding 2 healthy bodies to umpire.
Yeah.
And that was a big challenge.
I don't miss that at all.
No. And my AD tenure at Sparta started when they just lost 2 or 3 veteran Hall of Fame type coaches. And Mark Narth, Roger Gerlach, those guys have won a lot of games and been phenomenal coaches. I mean, Mark Narth's done things for the running program that they've never emulated, may never emulate.
Yes.
And
Roger was good in baseball,
Right.
volleyball, basketball.
yeah, I mean, he had a lot of success. So I was replacing them with new people, and then that was hard, and didn't always get along with the superintendent's vision of how it should be, and mine didn't always jive. So that kind of was a sticking point for me, and then. So I would say those are the biggest challenges. And the promotional part, I loved that part, and, hospitality, I loved all that, and working with the community, getting people to donate, that part I love.
I think in the short time I gave you to answer that, you answered it very well. I only did it for 2 years, but I think those things you mentioned, the challenges, the toughest parts, the spring rainouts, I agree with every single one of those. Those were all big challenges. And sometimes you're trying to hire the right people. You don't always get the best applicants, or, depending on the school you're at. And sometimes you do get, and you're just torn between 2. And replacing legendary people is a daunting task, because no matter what you do, they're not going to be like the other person. That's what you mentioned about Bobby Wagner stepping in for and replacing Dick Corn. Those stories are few and far between, that someone replaces a legend and keeps that thing rolling at a high level.
The other way left.
It can. It's very difficult to do. But last thing is 17 years as the Southern Illinois Coaches Association president. So tell me how you got that job, how that came about, when it was offered. It was 17 years ago, but how'd that come about?
Well, I've been in the association since 1986, 87.
Right.
My introduction to the Southern Illinois Coaches Association is this. My very first meeting at the DuQuoin Elks, which you know where we used to have the fried chicken.
Fried chicken, I was
from
gonna
KFC.
say.
It was a big deal for all
It was
of
a
us.
big deal.
Mike Donowski, the great Ziegler-Royalton coach, and Coach Deck from Carterville are about to go nose to nose over a film exchange in my very first meeting. I thought, wow, is this how it always is? That was my my very first meeting.
Yep.
I haven't missed a meeting since.
There was a tension in those early meetings. I mean, there was an excitement. There was also the rivalries were
Right.
strong, the
Well,
tension.
The reason we all went to the meetings, and I think you remember this in the old days, was because you had to set up with the different schools how you're going to do your film exchange. Where were you going to meet halfway?
That's
those
true.
different things.
That's true.
The reason so many coaches went
That's
back
true.
then. They took your whole staff. It wasn't just a couple. Almost
No, everybody went.
And thered be 300 or 400 of us there
Yep.
when we first started.
You're right.
And I just, I've been in the association my whole teaching and coaching career has been in Southern Illinois. I'm a Southern Illinois boy. I'm proud of Southern Illinois. When our teams go to the state tournament, I want us to win it. I have a thing every year that I tell. I think, we will not trade scouting reports with Central and Northern Illinois on our schools.
right.
Once we get to the big, we're going to try to win them.
Yeah.
And when we win a state championship, I just glow with pride. And no matter what sport, girls, boys, it doesn't matter. I'm proud of Southern Illinois. I'm proud to be the president. I got it. Basically, Darren Lee had it before me, and he was going to leave Nashville to go to Collinsville, so I took it, and I've had it ever since. I don't know. I enjoy every year looking forward to the meetings. I try to go to each table and spend 5 or 10 minutes with each group. I love coaches. I love everything about them. I love being around them. It gives me a charge every fall to get started. Abby Miles Garlach has been my secretary the whole time. She does a phenomenal job. She sends all the stuff out for the committees. She sends the All-South certificates out for me, and does all those kind of things. So she's just been great help. And there's really not that much to it. But I will say this. I've taken some grief over the years because kids haven't made All-South. I've never added a kid to the All-South team in my tenure. I've been asked countless number of times. And sometimes...
Oh, they call you
right.
for you to put someone on the...
Will you add somebody on this
I see.
team or that team? I wouldn't do that. Why have committees if I'm going to add?
Yeah,
Then they're going
right,
to say, well, why
right.
don't you just pick them all?
Right.
And I can't do that.
Right.
I'm not at all the sports.
No.
So I've never tried to do that. I've had coaches and athletic directors call and chew me out because their coach didn't make Coach of the Year. And I think you know this, being in the business. Traditionally, the coach that goes the furthest in the state series has normally been our Coach of the Year. Now, we've had some circumstances where somebody just did an unbelievable job and they might get it. But normally, that's kind of how it works.
Sure.
And, I'm not going to add coaches or, I just never got into that part of it. So
Well, yeah, once you go down that road.
right. Once you do it for one, you have to do it for all.
Exactly.
So I've just enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm proud to be from Southern Illinois. I love Southern Illinois, and I want to see it succeed. And our numbers are shrinking. All our high school enrollments are shrinking. We can't play 3 levels of football everywhere anymore, and it's harder and harder for us to make state runs. I mean, we haven't had a state football champion in over 20 years now.
And it's getting harder and harder to find good coaches and to keep good coaches.
Right.
And those guys that are still doing it are doing it right now. Hats off, because it's never been more challenging. And I love what you've done for Southern Illinois coaches your whole career, Rich, as an assistant, as a head coach at some very challenging places, your impact on kids, your willingness to take this job and support the Coaches Association and keep it alive. You have a great legacy. You have a great legacy. And I know when we talked about this as we walked in today. I think you spoke so well today about Southern Illinois, the traditions, the people you have intersected it with as a coach, the lives you've impacted, the people you've worked with, the programs you have helped. Buddy, those are a lot of feathers in your cap. And I'm proud to sit down today and talk to you about this, because you deserve this. I told you beforehand, part of the reason I did this was I wanted people to get to know these names they've heard, but they don't know the people. And I think for a lot of people, they've heard your name for years. they got introduced to you now for the first time. And I think that's pretty special.
Well, I appreciate
and I'm
that.
so glad you did this. Anything else about your family? Anything else before we go?
Well, you know, the job at Sparta was very, very challenging. I was head football coach. We got to 4-5. Could never get us to. We were 5-4 later as a helper, but we never could get to playoff points. Sparta hadn't been in the football playoffs since 1991. I desperately wanted to get them there. Could not. Got them to the mountain. Couldn't get them to the top. Was fortunate enough to get Sparta the regional basketball championship and couldn't beat Coach Wagner and the Panthers. Could get them there, but couldn't get them to the top. So, you know, ever since I was in first grade, that was my whole dream in life, was to be the head coach of Sparta. And I got to achieve that. So did it, you know, my senior yearbook, you know, they had things that we wanted to achieve in life. My senior quote was, I want to return to teach and coach and take Sparta to state. And I never got to do that part of it. I got to coach, I got to be AD, you know, and experience a lot of things, but the winning wasn't what we wanted it to be.
What do you want your legacy to be?
That I help kids, that I love kids, and I tried to make them better. And I was a loyal assistant. When a coach asked me to do something, I did it. I didn't question. I did what they asked. And that, you know, I just tried to make the world better.
You have, my friend, great legacy, great storyteller. Thank you for everything you've done over the years for so many kids and coaches. I appreciate you, partner.
All right, brother.
Hey, listen, thanks again for joining us. I want to thank Rich Williams for sharing so much. And man, he dropped some beautiful stories today and some tributes to some great people. I want to thank Swinford Media. I want to thank Crown Brew, Ross and Abby, Tony Gooch at Marion Plumbing. I want to thank Jeff and Matt at Adrenaline Fundraising. And I want to thank you for continuing to watch and listen and be supportive of this. And we're going to continue to bring you some great coaches. We've got some great ones lined up for you. And we'll kind of hit and miss over the summer with schedules, but we're going to keep bringing you some great people in the coming weeks. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and have a great summer. Hope to see you soon. Thanks.